Castlevania is known for being really difficult. But why? Is it a case of players needing to get good? Or is the game poorly designed and unfair? To find out, I streamed my first ever playthrough of Castlevania, with no guides and no hints. I tracked how many times I lost a life, or took a hit, and why. And then I went back and analyzed the data. The data revealed the 3 most difficult parts of the game, the 2 big challenges that players need to be aware of, and the single greatest factor of why Castlevania is so difficult. Let's jump right into the data. From start to finish, it took me 379 deaths to go from the gates of the castle to sinking it. Castlevania has 6 levels. If we start by plotting out my deaths per level, we will get this chart. Keep in mind that the y-axis goes up in increments of 50. So while it took me 51 deaths to clear level 4, I more than tripled that count in level 5 with 165 deaths before I finally escaped. That is a huge spike in deaths and difficulty. If we zoom in on just level 5, we find that it's broken down into 3 stages, 13, 14, and 15. Most of the deaths happen in stage 15. If we zoom in again, stage 15 is broken into 3 sections, a small section to gather resources, a hallway, and then a boss fight with the Grim Reaper. Most of the deaths are not against the boss, but instead in the hallway leading up to the fight. Let me show you what that section looks like. This part of the game has Simon dealing with 2 different enemies. First, the Axe Knights. They will back up, keeping a fixed distance away from Simon, while throwing axes in a boomerang pattern. Simon must move faster than the knight in order to close the distance between them to land hits. Also found here are the Medusa heads that fly in a sine wave pattern from the sides of the screen every 5 seconds. They cause the player to move slowly and deliberately to avoid damage.
Objection!
Agreed, Phoenix. Simon moves very deliberately. The biggest contributor to the stiff controls is the fixed jump arc. When Simon commits to a jump, his jump is the exact same every time. There is no momentum in this game. Simon will either jump straight up or in that fixed arc with no course correction in the middle. Simon's controls do not allow the player to react to troublesome scenarios they may find themselves in. Instead, the player must be very proactive, always looking ahead and moving and attacking to avoid those troublesome situations before they happen. And for the most part, the game is designed with these controls in mind. Pits are not implemented as platforming challenges. Most of the enemies move slowly and have a predictable pattern, and most enemies appear with plenty of time for Simon to anticipate and dispatch them. But the difficulty spikes that I noticed from my playthrough come from Simon getting dogpiled or ambushed. Let's return to the hallway in level 5 for an example of a dogpile.
So we got full health going into the hallway here. Whoops. Immediately take a hit. Then we take another hit. And then we take a 3rd hit. Because this game, when it gets you, it just dogpiles you.
There are sections of the game where enemies and projectiles just keep stacking up while Simon is recovering from taking his first hit. By the time the player gets control again, there are too many enemies and Simon just gets overwhelmed and dogpiled. Let's return to the data to find another interesting anomaly. Would you think that Simon dies from falling into pits or losing all of his health more often? To answer that, let's start with the total death count, then remove the Dracula attempts, there's no pits there, then remove all of the deaths from level 5, there are no pits in level 5. This leaves us with 99. This is the total number of deaths from parts of the game that have pitfalls. Out of the remaining 99, 56 deaths were from falling into pits. If you're enjoying the data analysis, please hit the like button. And if there's another difficult game that you want me to perform this experiment on, please leave it down in the comments. Earlier, I said that in Castlevania, pits are not implemented as platforming challenges. In Super Mario Bros., there are sections where there are no enemies, and the challenge comes from navigating the pits and the platforms. In Castlevania, the pits are always combined with enemies to increase the punishment if Simon does get hit. If the enemy hits Simon and knocks him back into a pit, then it's like they got a critical hit, or a one-hit KO. Some enemies aim for that critical hit by ambushing Simon, and for the most part the game is designed with these controls in mind. Most of the enemies move slowly and have a predictable pattern, and most enemies appear with plenty of time for Simon to anticipate and dispatch them. Most of them, but not all of them. Some enemies come at Simon in a fashion that makes it impossible for him to deal with them. Simon really struggles with enemies that attack from above or below. Simon also has some wind-up to the whip attack, meaning that he needs to be anticipating incoming enemies. The only solution to this is trial and error, knowing what is coming and anticipating it. The ambush also comes into play on the second highest cause of death, the final fight with Dracula. Dracula has two forms, the Count and the Cookie Monster.
Okay.
The Cookie Monster pattern is straightforward, jumping towards Simon to corner him. The Count's pattern is also straightforward but more troublesome, appearing and then disappearing in between attacks. The ambush is on the appearance. Simon gets 4 hits against both forms of Dracula, and if he appears right on top of Simon, you're down 1 hit. It helps to keep Simon moving, but if the Count spawns in that sweet spot, then consider yourself ambushed. Castlevania is a difficult game, but I believe that it's well designed and fair. The knockback is in play, and there are some tricky parts at the end of the game. Sometimes it even seems unfair, but everything that the player requires is provided. I say this because I was able to figure out how to overcome all of the obstacles with the tools the game provided. In my first playthrough, I lamented how Simon controlled. I wasn't able to react to some sudden incoming enemies suffering a few ambushes, but it never got to the point where I needed to memorize entire stages. New players need to be ever vigilant to avoid that critical hit or dogpile, but if they are vigilant, those stray hits can be avoided. And I would say that keeping the player on their toes when adventuring through a spooky, monster-filled castle is a plus, and a good example of using the game mechanic to have the player relate to Simon. One wrong move, and it could all be over. Right after this experiment, I wanted to compare the original Castlevania with Super Castlevania 4, a retelling of the same story. But Simon's controls have now improved, and the whip has become more versatile. This changes the level design, the enemies, and the power-ups. But how does it change the difficulty when compared to the first game? Check out that video here and leave a comment on the other difficult games that I should explore next.